Bacillus anthracis is a spore-producing bacteria that, despite originating in Egypt, lives almost everywhere. It typically affects cattle, although it is transmissible to humans, who, while sick, aren't contagious. The sickness can be severe, especially in cases of inhalation infection. In the wild, it's exceedingly rare. But you know Bacillus anthracis by its more popular name, anthrax. And you know anthrax for its weaponized use. 4 letters would be mailed to news outlets and politicians roughly 9/18/2001, a week after the butt of most of my jokes and the most devastating attack on American soil. These letters contained what I can best describe as a sad, edgy attempt to imitate a vaguely Muslim terrorist group. The cringe was only the most noticeable, but it was not the worst, because in these letters, contained within, was also anthrax. Approximately 23 people would contract inhalation anthrax, and 5 would die, many of them not by targeting, but by cross-contamination and bad luck. These deaths by terrorism happened at a sensitive time of fury and miscalculation for the United States, and so the investigation was on. The letters were sent to NBC and ABC News respectively, 2 of them were, that is, and the contents being this: 09/11/01. This is next. Take penicillin now. Death to America. Death to Israel. Allah is great. Now, if you're watching the screen, you saw our bargain bin Batman villain's spelling error, but for those at home listening, Chucklenuts here spelled penicillin with an A. The other 2 letters were mailed to Senators Tom Daschle of South Dakota, which I don't get. This guy's gotta be a contender for the least important part of the United States. I seriously don't understand why the perpetrator here got it in their mind to threaten a politician from South Dakota. The stray cat your grandma ran over is subjectively more important to global politics, but I digress. The second senator to receive a letter was Senator Patrick Leahy. The contents of the Senate letters were slightly different, reading, 09/11/01. You cannot stop us. We have this anthrax. You die now. Are you afraid? Death to America. Death to Israel. Allah is great. All the letters were copies made by a copy machine, and the originals were never found. Each letter was trimmed to a slightly different size. The Senate letter uses punctuation, while the media letter does not. The handwriting on the media letter in envelopes is roughly twice the size of the handwriting on the Senate letter and envelopes. The envelopes addressed to Senators Daschle and Leahy had fictitious return addresses. 4th grade, Greendale School, Franklin Park, New Jersey, 08852. Now, with this context out of the way, let's actually get into the investigation. Much like the year of 2020, this investigation was marred by misfortune from the start. On October 10th, the National Anthrax Archive was destroyed, and without that archive to review, identifying the specific strain in what had grown to be called the Amerithrax attacks would be incredibly difficult and take a long time. And with that, the most likely route of investigation, tracking the anthrax, was gone. Also hindering this investigation was the raging revenge boner of George W. Bush. This guy wanted those kids in the Middle East to rest in peace. And White House officials were calling FBI Director Robert Mueller and pressuring him into falsely accusing Al-Qaeda or other Middle Eastern groups. Unlike your grandparents when the scammers call, Mueller resisted the pressure, despite many politicians going on television to insinuate it was Al-Qaeda and actively undermining the FBI investigation. These claims went so far as to, with no basis, claim that bentonite, a chemical used in Iraq, was present in the anthrax even though it wasn't. Despite these major roadblocks, the investigation persisted. First up was the fake return addresses written on the politicians' letters. This wasn't a real place, but it did lead to a real zip code in New Jersey. Much like the relationship you're only in because you're too afraid to be alone, it led nowhere. Found in a different part of New Jersey, however, was a mailbox to test positively for anthrax spores, and this is important later. Among other leads was a false positive test in a Microsoft building located in Reno, Nevada. As we all know, Nevada being home to eldritch terrors and worse, anthrax was no big deal, but this did lead also nowhere, much like 40% of college courses people take before changing majors. At the time, hundreds of hoax letters were being thrown around by what I can best guess were 4chan losers before 4chan. But these false flag letters did produce something, at least according to English professor Don Foster, who connected the real letters and the hoax letters to one Mr. Steven Hatfield. Making this connection promising was that Hatfield was a pathologist and a bioweapons expert, the kind of man that could do this. In mid-2002, the FBI thought they had their guy and did soft and gentle things like raiding his home several times, tapping his phone, and accidentally letting the press find out he was a suspect, which consequently got him fired and basically ruined his life. Per the usual, the FBI was as effective as a monkey attempting intercourse with a football. They didn't have the right guy, and Mr. Hatfield successfully sued for $5.6 million, followed by complete exoneration after it was proven he couldn't have logically gained access to anthrax. By 2003, the case seemed to have gone cold. Like most bad comedians, the perpetrator got to walk away after ruining your day and wasting your $3. But this series isn't far enough in yet for me to talk about a mystery with no possible solution. And sure enough, in the upcoming years, the FBI found a man with all the shining plausibility of Hatfield, and one who actually had reason to do it and worked around anthrax. Dr. Bruce Ivins worked as a scientist in the U.S. Army in an anthrax vaccine program that was going to be phased out. This guy played with anthrax for a living he was about to lose. With 9/11 having just occurred, by all rights the FBI investigation shouldn't have even happened. Politicians wanted to blame the Middle East, and it could have been the perfect crime. To add to this, the FBI was able to eventually identify the strain, or at least its general family, and Bruce was the one to show the FBI how to tell the difference in very small cases. And with this knowledge, it could be determined the strain used was one Ivins himself had created. Bruce Ivins became a suspect in 2007, but before the Fed could close in, he killed himself. Post-mortem, the FBI ID'd him as the sole perpetrator. Little evidence tied Ivins to the crime. His home and car had no anthrax spores, but the time removed from 2001 and 2007 could have affected that. He also wasn't near the positive mailbox, but on the other hand, he had ample reason to do it. The Amerithrax attacks prolonged vaccine work, and he was directly involved with the murder weapon, only one of 100 people to work on similar projects. He also talked at an abnormal rate about how little he wanted to hurt people and how he would never willingly kill someone, so much so that it is noted several times in the Wikipedia article. The letters had preventative measures like tape over paper seams and a direct warning that the recipient had been poisoned within them. And of course, there is also the conspiracy that there were other secret messages written out in highlighted letters that were further warnings. Personally, I think it's likely that Dr. Bruce Ivins did it, but you're a big grown person, so I leave it down to you to decide who you think did it. And now, we're at the end of the video, but don't leave just yet, I still have more talking to do. Thank you so much for watching, it really does mean the world to me. Whether you're old here and just watching a new video, or you're new here, go ahead and consider subscribing if you are new here. It is completely free, you're clearly mildly bored, I'm clearly mildly entertaining, we can help each other out, help a guy chase his dreams. Now, thank you again for watching, whether you decide to subscribe or whether you simply float away, whether you like or dislike the video. I really do appreciate it. It means the world to me that I can make these videos and have an audience. Big thanks to my editor for putting this video together, and big thanks to my at the time of recording 4 patrons, Sumi, David Height, That's Insane Henry, and AJ. It is with your guys' help that I can do cool things like keep my lights on, pay for gas, and eat. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and stop talking. So, actually, psych. No, I'm not, because this is entry 3 of 1000 on the Mystery Iceberg. This behemoth of a man is my most recent project. I finished the True Crime series and decided I simply had not had enough, and thus I bit off something even bigger that by all rights I should not be able to chew. but I'm covering it, and I'm releasing videos covering it daily. So if that also interests you, go ahead and subscribe. And now, for realsies, I'm going to go ahead and stop talking. So until next time, have a great time, and memento mori.